Hey friends, I was just browsing the release notes of Playwright 1.42, and while it, as always, includes many DX improvements, there is one method that particularly stands out this time. Page.addLocatorHandler changes the way how we can treat unpredictable elements such as banners or modals that could appear at random times. So if you're struggling with testing non-deterministic user flows, this video is for you. Let's go! If you're using Playwright for end-to-end testing or synthetic monitoring with Checkly, you might know these challenging situations, especially when you're testing production, that every now and then there could be an element blocking your test actions. This could be the holy cookie banner or maybe an intercom widget that asks for feedback at random times. So how could you deal with these elements showing up at random times in your Playwright tests? Let's look at an example. As always, I already prepared a Playwright test case that is called Login Validation Works, and it does quite a few things. And I already started Playwright's UI mode with npx playwright test -UI. And the best way to show you what this test case is doing is by running it. So let's enter UI mode. If you haven't seen UI mode before, it allows you to run all your test cases. Here on the left side, you see all the actions that are taken in your Playwright test case here in the middle. You have some screenshots and you got valuable debug information like the console, the network layer, errors, and it's overall a beautiful way to write and debug your Playwright test cases. And one of my favorite features is that you can enable watch mode here by clicking this eye icon. And whenever I now save my login spec.ts file, we will rerun our Playwright test. So let's kick it off. When I now run the test case, login validation works, we can follow along what's happening and we can have a look at all these screenshots that are taking on the way. So we see that there are interactions with the navigation, then the test case is navigating into different areas of the page, and then at some point it tries to log into Checkly, then to check that the email validation works, and as you see it here below, it does. We see a little message that is telling us that the email is invalid. And you might have noticed it, we at Checkly also include a cookie banner that is currently not handled in this test case. It's not standing in the way yet, but we'll get to this in a second. So how would we have closed this cookie banner before we had page.addLocatorHandler? A very common approach to treat cookie banners or any elements that could potentially show up but are not always is to wrap some actions and web-first assertions into a try-catch statements. So what we see here is that I added a try-catch that locates the cookie accept button that has the text accept all, and then it checks if this element is visible in the page and it waits for 3 seconds. If it is, it will click it and it will expect that then this accept all button will be gone and will not be visible. And if there's no cookie banner shown for 3 seconds, this web-first assertion here, expect to be visible, will throw an exception which we will catch. And the test will just move on. Let's hit save and see what happens. So when we go back to UI mode, Playwright is now rerunning our tests. And we already see it here in our screenshots above. There's the cookie banner and we're clicking it away. And then the test is just doing what it's supposed to do. And this is great for this use case. But this approach is not actually solving the problem of elements showing at random times. And let me show you when this breaks. I prepared a quick helper function that will change when the cookie banner is shown and also where it will be rendered. So let's call await make cookie banner slow and aggressive, and let's hit save. When we now go back to Playwright UI mode, we see here that we have the to be visible check for the cookie banner, but it's timing out. And now let's check the screenshots. We see that the cookie banner is now rendered on top and it is blocking the main navigation. And this leads to this test case failing because it is covering the elements that we're trying to click. And this is quite common for cookie banners or intercom widgets or anything third-party that might interrupt the user in whatever they're trying to do. And also, when we now look at this test case, by catching failed web-first assertions like this one here to be visible, we're artificially slowing our test case down in case the element that sometimes shows up isn't showing. So this is overall not the best way to avoid flaky test cases. By using try-catch, we had to rely on magic numbers, and it wasn't really checking elements that could show up at any time. So actually what we want to do is we want to check, hey, is the cookie banner here? If so, do something. Hey, is the cookie banner here? If so, do something. And you could go on and add this check before every action and before every assertion, but this would be quite a little bit of work. And this is exactly what the new Playwright method does. So let me show you. So let me remove this try-catch and let me show you what it is about. In Playwright 142, we can now properly check and react to elements that really can show up at any time during the test case. So when I now add the new method that is called addLocatorHandler, we can react to the cookie banner showing up whenever. addLocatorHandler accepts two arguments. The first one is a locator, and we have here page get-by-role button accept all. This is included in the cookie banner, and Playwright will now check if this element is visible right before it performs an action, such as click or filling out a form field. And when this element is visible, it will execute this callback function, this handler. So whenever this button now is visible in the page, whenever in this test case, we will click the button and we will expect that it will not be visible after this click. So let's hit save and see what happens. When I go back to UI mode, we can first of all see if our test case is now working properly and is succeeding. And this indeed looks good. So we have here the login dialog. So nothing was blocking our navigation. So let's go slowly over all the screenshots. Let's see if we can spot the cookie banner. Here it is. Here, right in the middle of the test case, there was the cookie banner handling. And when we now go over all these actions, we should see here somewhere, let's check it here. So here we have an expect to be visible call. So this is a web first assertion. And right here, Playwright figure out, hey, right now the cookie banner is visible, so we should do something before we check if this heading is visible. And this worked out beautifully. So by relying on addLocatorHandler, now every action like locator click or every web first assertion could potentially run our cookie banner handling right before this action is executed. And I think this is just a beautiful approach to this problem of elements appearing at random times. But before you go all in, let's have a quick look at the Playwright docs, because there are some things that you have to keep in mind. And the Playwright team is nice enough to tell us what we have to consider when we use addLocatorHandler. So first of all, when you know when elements appear on the page in your test cases, for example, when you press a button and a modal or an overlay shows up, you should treat it as predictable behavior and not rely on addLocatorHandler. addLocatorHandler is really for these elements that could show up at any time during your test case, such as cookie banners, third-party widgets, or whatever you're shipping in your websites. Then you have to keep in mind that Playwright will check before every action or every web-first assertion if the locator that you provided is currently visible in the page. And then if it executes the handler that you provided, whatever you're doing in there, this will count towards your action or assertion timeout. So when you're doing things that take a lot of time in this handler, it could be that you're occasionally running into timeouts. And if you wanted to, you can also add multiple handlers in your Playwright test cases. So I think this is overall pretty sweet. What's this big warning here about? If you're using low-level actions such as locator focus, keyboard press, mouse move, mouse down, you have to consider that there could always be your locator handler running before these actions. Focus could get lost, other side effects could happen. So if you're using these low-level actions, you might want to consider going for more self-contained actions like locator.click. But I think this is only logical in this case. If you want to learn more, always check the playwright.dev docs. I think they're honestly pretty good. And this was the new Playwright method, addLocatorHandler, and I must say I'm a big fan. And this was this week's Playwright tip here on the Checkly YouTube channel. And always remember, if you're using Playwright for end-to-end testing, you might want to check out Checkly, because then you could start with synthetic monitoring to be really certain that all your websites and apps in production are running properly. And that's all I have for you today. I will see you next week with the next Playwright synthetic monitoring or API monitoring tips and tricks video. Talk to you soon.